Hi again, everybody. California is one of the largest economies in the world, one of the most important innovators of popular culture, leaders of technological advancement, producers of food crops, and generators of groundbreaking science. But surrounding Hollywood and Silicon Valley is a more ancient and irreplaceable wealth, California's biodiversity. That quotation came from the book Ecosystems of California and was written by Dr. Bernie Tershi, a professor at UCSC, and his co-authors just 5 years ago. We can think of biodiversity as species richness, which refers to the total number of species of plants or animals, or both, in a given area. But biodiversity can also refer to the range of ecosystems or plant communities. The biodiversity of California is rich in both species and ecosystems. The goal of this unit is to give you a very brief introduction to the breadth of California's floral biodiversity, and by the end of this unit, you will be able to list the main factors which have influenced this. We will, of course, be revisiting biodiversity and the factors influencing it as we look at the main plant communities of the Monterey Bay over the coming weeks. The total number of plant species in California varies according to which source you use, but the number is around 5,000 native species of every plant type and life cycle. Plant type refers to whether a plant is a woody tree or shrub, a fern, succulent, or herbaceous, which includes grasses, sedges, rushes, bulbs, and corms. Life cycle refers to whether a plant is a perennial, biennial, or annual. To give the total number of California native plant species some perspective, Great Britain, which is somewhat similar in length and size, has just under 2,300 native plant species, less than half that of California. California has ephemeral herbaceous annuals that live for only a few weeks, like the tiny golden linanthus pictured in the inset photo on the right that's native to the Mojave and Sonoran deserts. At the other extreme, we have Great Basin bristlecone pines in the eastern Sierra that are the oldest living organisms in the world, with some of them having been alive for over 5,000 years. California is home to the tallest trees in the world, coast redwoods, which grow to over 300 feet tall, and some of the smallest terrestrial plants. In Santa Cruz County, the tiny herbaceous monkeyflower, Diplochus ratanii, one of our local endemics, grows to less than an inch tall. California has the greatest concentration in the world of manzanita and ceanothus species, which have become two of the most popular genera to incorporate into our cultivated native landscapes. And finally, California is home to the world's largest tree by volume, the giant redwood, Sequoiadendron giganteum. California has also become home to more than 1,100 non-native plant species, which have become naturalized in our wildlands and natural areas. Some of these were deliberately introduced, some of them are accidental escapees, and around 200 of the 1,100 have become invasive. Examples of some of the most invasive plants locally are pampas grass, ice plant, silver wattle, and blue gum. And unfortunately, you can see all of these on the Cabrillo campus. We'll talk more about invasive plants in another module. Not only does California have a particularly high floral diversity, but it also has a particularly high level of floral endemism, with more than 33% of California's native plants being endemic, including the yellow bush lupin, Lupinus arboreus, which you can see in the photos here, and which you can see growing locally in Santa Cruz County on coastal bluffs and sand dunes. California also has a high level of animal biodiversity. The state only comprises 3% of the US land area, but compared to the other states, it ranks first in plant and animal species richness, as well as single-state endemic species richness. California is home to more than 30% of all plant and vertebrate species in the US and ranks in the top 5 states for richness of every group of vertebrates except freshwater fishes. Compared to other countries in the world, California ranks about 17th in breeding bird richness and 39th in mammal richness. The rich diversity of California's flora and fauna is one reason the California Floristic Province has been designated as a World Biodiversity Hotspot. There are currently 37 biodiversity hotspots worldwide, most of which are in tropical areas. Together, they represent just 2.4% of the Earth's land surface, but support nearly 60% of the world's plant, bird, mammal, reptile, and amphibian species, and 43% of these species as endemics. One of the criterion for designation as a biodiversity hotspot is that 0.5% or 1,500 of a region's vascular plants must be endemic. So with 33% of its plants as endemics, California certainly more than meets this criterion. On the surface, it would appear to be a huge honor to be living in a biogeographic region that has such world-renowned biodiversity. But the second criterion for receiving a hotspot designation is that a region has to have lost at least 70% of its original primary natural vegetation, and that the remainder is threatened with destruction. This biodiversity hotspot designation is a stark reminder for us of the vulnerability of California's natural ecosystems and the importance of protecting what remains. Building sustainability into agricultural and horticultural enterprises and cultivated landscapes is just one small component of this protection. So let's turn briefly now to the main factors that have shaped California's biodiversity. We could easily spend the whole semester or more looking at these factors, but for now, it's sufficient to understand that the state's biodiversity results from complex interactions between its incredibly diverse topography, geology, and microclimates. These create a wide range of ecological niches for plant life, which in turn create a wide range of habitats for other organisms. So let's spend a couple of minutes looking slightly more closely at the factors influencing biodiversity, especially climate. For those of you who'd like to dig more deeply into this topic, I've put some supplementary resources in Canvas. California is a region with a high level of tectonic activity, and over millions of years, patterns of subduction and uplifting as the Pacific Plate and North American Plate have scraped against each other have resulted in a wide range of topographical features, which you'll see on the next slide. Running roughly north to south along the eastern edge of the state are the Sierra Nevada and Cascade Ranges. Running parallel to the Sierra Nevada, but closer to the coast, are the Coast Ranges. The North Coast Ranges run from the San Francisco Bay northwards and meet up with the Klamath Mountains, which join with the southern end of the Cascades. The South Coast Ranges run from the San Francisco Bay southwards towards Santa Barbara, where the east-west oriented transverse ranges form a link between the Coast Ranges and the southern end of the Sierra Nevada. Between this ring of mountain ranges is the large, relatively flat basin of the Central Valley, which is sometimes also called the Great Valley. And it's divided into the Sacramento Valley in the north and the San Joaquin Valley in the south. Prior to agricultural development, the Central Valley was home to extensive wetlands and wildflower prairies, most of which have been lost to draining, agriculture, and development, although there are still some remnants of these plant communities. Tectonic activity also influenced California's diverse geology, which in turn influences the chemical composition and physical characteristics of the state's soils. The unique chemical composition of some of these soils has produced plants with unique adaptations to survival and contributed to California's high level of plant endemism. As a couple of examples, on the right you can see photos of two plants that are adapted to serpentine soils. The tree, Sargent cypress, and the uncommon jewel flower, a small herbaceous annual. Both of these plants grow only on serpentine soils. Serpentinite is California's state rock, and there are many outcroppings of it in the North Coast ranges. There are also some in the South Coast ranges, but nowhere near as many as in the north. Serpentinite usually has a very distinctive greenish color, and its exposed surface often has a waxy sheen to it. Serpentine soils have a very low calcium content and particularly high levels of magnesium. Both of these are essential nutrients for plant growth, but plants aren't able to take up sufficient amounts of calcium when magnesium levels are so high. In addition to the imbalance of these two essential nutrients, serpentine soils also contain low levels of nitrogen, which is also an essential plant nutrient, and high levels of nickel and chromium, which can both be phytotoxic. The result is that plants growing on serpentine soils are often stunted. Serpentine soils have a high level of endemics associated with them, which have developed adaptations to these unique chemical properties of these soils. Climate is the long-term averaging of weather data, which includes wind, precipitation, temperature, and relative humidity. These are all influenced by elevation, latitude, exposure, and proximity to large bodies of water. California's 1,000-mile-long west-facing coastline, coupled with the north-south orientation of the Coast Ranges, the Sierra Nevada, and the Peninsula Ranges, are major influences on California's diverse microclimates. In particular, the amount of precipitation as you move from west to east across the state, and of course the amount of precipitation strongly influences plant growth. The winds in California generally come from the west or northwest, and as they move across the Pacific Ocean, they pick up moisture. As these moisture clouds meet the coast ranges, they rise and cool in temperature, resulting in moisture being released as rain. As the clouds are blown over to the east side of the coast ranges, they lose altitude and heat up, which increases their ability to hold moisture. As a result, relative humidity is lower and rainfall is lower in the Santa Clara Valley and the Central Valley than it is west of the coast ranges. A similar process is repeated as the clouds meet the Sierra Nevada. They cool again as they rise up the western slopes of the Sierra, releasing plenty of rain on the mid-elevation ranges. Elevations in the Sierra Nevada, though, are much higher than the coast ranges, so by the time the clouds reach the higher elevations, they've been wrung dry. The result is that there's very little water left in them once they cross the Sierra Nevada, and this has resulted in extremely dry desert-like regions in the high altitude areas east of the Sierra Nevada. The coast ranges also create a barrier that restricts the flow of cool air from the ocean across the state, so temperatures remain lower along the coast than on the eastern side of the coast ranges. Except at points where there's a break in the mountain ranges, such as at the San Francisco Bay and the Salinas Valley, where fog can drift inland for a considerable distance, creating cooler regional microclimates with a greater maritime influence. Variability in temperatures along the coast is also moderated by the Pacific Ocean, which serves to keep coastal temperatures lower in the summer and warmer in the winter than the more inland areas. We'll come back to these climate influences as we discuss our local plant communities and go out on field trips this semester. But for now, let's just summarize what's been covered in this unit. California has one of the highest levels of floral biodiversity of any region in the world. The tallest trees in the world are native to California, as are the largest trees by volume and the oldest living organisms on Earth, the Great Basin bristlecone pine. California's biodiversity is the result of complex interactions between its varied topography, the north-south orientation of its main mountain ranges, climate, its long west-facing coastline, and geology. The California Floristic Province is designated as a World Biodiversity Hotspot because of its high level of biodiversity, which also includes a high level of endemism, but also because it has lost 70% of its original natural vegetation, and there are significant threats to remaining vegetation. While we have much to be proud of in California, the designation as a biodiversity hotspot is a reminder to us of the importance of protecting our natural ecosystems. That's the end of this unit. Now head back to Canvas to work your way through the next unit in this module.